After almost 3 weeks of protests against police brutality in the United States, police reforms are now being introduced in various states of the country in a bid to bring about some form of change. The New York Police Department, for instance, has now closed its anti-crime department, disbanding this controversial branch. The NYPD's anti-crime branch, which operated in plain clothes, has been responsible for a large number of shootings and complaints. About 600 officers working in this unit will be given new assignments. According to records, plainclothes officers have been responsible for most police shootings in New York City. In 2018 alone, almost 54% of NYPD shootings involved plainclothes officers.
Staying together.
Make no mistake, this is a seismic shift in the culture of how the NYPD polices this great city. It will be felt immediately throughout the 5 district attorneys' offices. It will be felt immediately in the communities that we protect.
And this is not the only reform that the city has implemented. A new reform states that all personnel and disciplinary records of police officers will no longer remain a secret. The New York City Council is also reconsidering a bill to criminalize the use of chokeholds. California and Florida have already banned chokeholds and neck restraints, similar to the one that killed George Floyd. In Atlanta, Mayor Keisha Bottoms announced immediate reforms within the police department after the killing of another black man. New orders require the police officers to de-escalate situations and to intervene when another cop is using excessive force. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a new panel will review the state's police policy on force. A 21-member panel will review cases where the use of force may not have been necessary. With these Black Lives Matter protests raging across the world, the killing of another black man by police officers in Atlanta has now set off a fresh wave of protests. US President Donald Trump even went ahead to call the killing of Rayshard Brooks very disturbing. Listen in.
I thought it was a terrible, I'm not going to compare things, but I thought it was a terrible situation. I studied it closely. I'm going to get some reports done today, very strong reports, and we'll have a little more to say about it tomorrow, but certainly to me, it was very disturbing.
The police were called when Brooks fell asleep in his car at an eatery's drive-thru. He was later shot dead when he tried to escape arrest. The family of Rayshard Brooks has now called for drastic change in policing.
The trust that we have with the police force is broken. And the only way to heal some of these wounds is through a conviction and a drastic change with the police department. But honestly, true justice will never prevail because we will never be able to bring back Rayshard Brooks.
Meanwhile, protests continue in Atlanta, calling out police brutality and racial discrimination. Hundreds of demonstrators marched to the Capitol building calling for a repeal of the citizens' arrest law.
No peace! No president! Police! No justice! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job!
Thousands also gathered in New York for a Black Trans Lives Matter rally in Brooklyn. Similar rallies took place in Los Angeles to support the Black LGBTQ community. For more details about the situation on ground in the United States, Jagriti Lave is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Jagriti, thank you so much for joining us. Now, my first question to you is about the recent Atlanta shooting. We know that the victim, Rayshard Brooks' family, is demanding justice and a drastic change in police reforms. So what exactly are they asking for, and will their demands be met? For instance, we know that the anti-crime department of the NYPD has already been shut down.
Yes, the family of Rayshard Brooks gave a news conference today and they were calling for justice. They were calling for changes. This is similar to demands that have been made by families of many victims who have, of many African-American families who have lost loved ones at the hands of the police. And one of the things that they said was that they can't believe that this time this has happened. This has landed on their doorstep. They've seen the protests happening in Atlanta, and this time it's hit so close to home by them being personally affected. So clearly they want changes to the police forces that many families and many people, actually the protesters across the country, are asking for. The reforms that are being asked are varied depending on who you speak to. There are changes that are being called for from defunding the police to broad reforms which include de-escalation tactics, etc., which many states and departments are looking to implement.
Right. Now, the Black Lives Matter protests are unfolding into a much bigger movement across the globe, in fact. And many say that the Trump administration was not anticipating such large-scale backlash. So how are they handling it?
So there's clear pressure on the Trump administration to respond to the protests. So far, the president's response against protesters has been met with a degree of criticism, not least from those who used to be in his own administration, who've said that his handling of the protesters has been heavy-handed. His threats, for example, to deploy the military have not gone down very well amongst former chiefs of staff and former senior military officers and his own former defense secretaries. And so the pressure is on for the administration. And so tomorrow the president says he's going to announce an executive order on police reforms. Right. He didn't really give much detail today when he was talking to reporters in the White House of what those reforms might be. But officials in media reports have suggested that one of the things could be the development of a national database to track police misconduct, giving incentives to police forces to de-escalate and to give funding to police forces for additional training, for example.